Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a first impressions that I owe you. This is my new ZT-308, and this was a birthday gift. If you watched the unboxing of this video, you'll notice that it was kind of a tease. I didn't actually unbox it all the way, because I had to wait until my birthday to open it. So, my birthday was a couple of days ago now, and I didn't show the unboxing because my wife wrapped this and I opened it on my birthday with her and my daughter, and I carried it that whole day. I carried it for a hike the next day, and then I got other knives since then. So it's been in pocket for a day and a half total so far, and I'm ready to do my first impressions on it. And then in about a week, might be a little more than that because this is my knife and I can take my time on it with there's other loaner knives I should be quick about. In a little over a week, I'm going to have my full review ready to go on this as well. But this is the ZT-308, and if you're not familiar with the model, it is an absolute tank. It is a beast. It's funny because ZT no longer says on their boxes built like a tank, and this is the most built like a tank ZT that I've ever owned. It's a behemoth. So it doesn't look to the naked eye like it's that big, and I knew it was going to be big, but something about just how thick everything on it is and how just robust and solid it feels. It is a slab of knife, and it's heavy. It's definitely not lightweight. Its size is its most notable feature. So one thing I should say real quick too before I jump in, this one is not wearing the factory clip. I do have the factory clip, but I bought this one from Adam Purvis, aka Apurvis Blades, and he made this clip. He makes custom clips for a number of knives, and this one is titanium with this cool kind of like almost wood grainy pattern on it, and it's anodized blue. I'm not sure yet. I might get a replacement scale for this. I might dress it up over time, but I like this factory scale. And anyway, that's a whole nother conversation we can have later. But this one's wearing this milled titanium clip, so that's worth saying. My experience, I haven't put the factory clip on it. It came with this one on it, and all of my experience is going to be based on it wearing this clip, because I like this clip. I have no reason to change it. Anywho, this is very heavy, very large. It feels like probably the most substantial folder I've ever owned. The only other folder that might have been as substantial as this one is the Spyderco Tough, which I sold to my buddy Kyle from DTOM Knives and Gear because he wanted it so bad. I loved that knife, but it's more him than it was me. And that knife would be the only real comparable knife in terms of beefiness that I've ever owned, folder-wise. This thing is just, it is such a tank. It really is. So we've got CPM 20 CV blade steel, and it's a nice, pretty tall flat grind. And we've got this interesting swedge up here, which I actually quite like design-wise. It doesn't bother me one bit. Got a little bit of a flat there, but it is a tall flat grind. It comes down to be thinner behind the edge than I was expecting. It's actually a pretty slicey profile. It's a pretty thick blade stock. It's definitely not thin. And so, yeah, I'm impressed with how good of a cutter this actually is, and it's a pretty long blade too. I don't know what the exact dimensions are. I'm not the dimensions guy. If that's what you're looking for, look on ZT's website. But it's over 3.5 inches for sure. I don't know if it's quite 4. It might be a full 4 inches, but it's a big, big knife. The handle scales, well, the scale on this side we have G10, and it's this kind of cool coyote brown color. I think that's a little bit polarizing. I happen to like the color. I'm not sure with this clip. That's why I mentioned I might get a different scale, because I want to keep this clip on, but I feel like the blue with the brown and then the black hardware and the satin, I might prefer if I got like a black micarta or even a carbon scale or something. We'll see. I might switch this up. But the lock side, this is a titanium frame lock. So over here, we've got the same milled texture and pattern as we do on the G10, which is part of why I'm torn on whether I want to switch that G10 scale, because it's really cool that they're mirrored. They match each other, the same milled pattern. And we do have this cutout on both sides. There's a window here that I'm looking at you through where you can see through the knife. Some people hate that. I don't hate it, but I also couldn't care less about it. I think it's just one of those things. We actually talked about it briefly on the Sharp Talk podcast. There's an inherent risk of getting gunk in your bearings when you put holes right there. There's no real draw to it, but I think if I had to think of what ZT is doing, I think ZT is trying to be a little different, and no one else is really putting that design feature in, so it's something distinguishing. And I think there was some excitement around the 609 when they came out with that, and I kept saying on that podcast that I thought it was a Les George design. I think it's actually R.J. Martin, if Alex was right. Anyway, that one had the see-through pivot, which had a hole through it, and you could look through, and it needed a special tool and whatever. And I had one of those. I really liked the 609. That's actually a ZT I wouldn't mind owning again. But it doesn't serve any functional purpose to do that. It's just a design element. So I think ZT can't use R.J. Martin's pivot on every knife that they didn't collaborate with him on. So this is a way to put a cool see-through hole feature in the knife, maybe. I don't know. I shouldn't read into it too much, but they also did mill out or drill out that little section on the flipper tab, which is just another design thing. There's nothing functional about that. I guess you could call it weight relief, but this is not a light knife. And if they wanted to do weight relief, they should have milled out this titanium side internally, because it is, I feel like that's where most of the weight is coming from. But yeah, fit and finish, this is a really nice ZT. This action is really nice. The detent is stiffer than I think any ZT I've ever owned. It's a really stiff detent, and if I'm on the lock bar, it is really tough to engage, so I do have to watch my fingers there. Their new 707, which they just came out with, has a double detent system, which from what I understand is basically to combat that. I feel like I said that word weird. Anyway, it like puts another detent on this side so that when you put pressure, it can match that pressure in a negative sense, and it's still easy to engage the, I don't know. Well, I've also heard that makes the knife not drop shut very well at all, and I like the way this knife drops. It's a big, heavy blade, and it's fun the way it just glides down. So the action is fun to me on this one. It is stiff, so it's not, I don't know, I guess I get like a little bit fatigued if I'm doing it for an hour and a half, watching a whole movie, just sitting there doing it constantly. And if I'm on the lock bar and I accidentally put pressure there and then I like slip off of this, then it can be a little harsh. But the jimping on the lock, on the flipper tab isn't too aggressive. It feels pretty good to me. It gives me good traction on the flipper tab itself. I think without it, it would actually be too slick. And the spot where your finger lands is nice and slick. It's well designed in terms of it being a flipper only deployment. Let's think what else is there to say. In pocket, there's no getting around how heavy this knife is and how big it is. It's a bigger knife than I typically carry. I've carried it as a primary every time that I carry it. This would definitely not be a qualifier for a secondary knife for me. And with this pocket clip, the pocket clip functions great. It slides in and out of pocket very well, especially being this titanium side. Even though it's got this milled pattern in it, it's not like so aggressive that it's like snagging on the pocket or anything like that. The clip gives me good clearance, and it's ramped well up here. It's a nice, well-made pocket clip, so kudos to Adam for that. But yeah, it's heavy, and it's pretty chunky. The whole thing is contoured pretty well, so it feels nice and round. It's not just like super abrupt on all of the angles, and it does have this nice shape back here, so if I'm reaching in for my wallet, it's pretty well rounded. Overall, I kind of dig it in a lot of ways. It's funny, like, I had watched a lot of reviews on this knife, more than I typically do, because when I was picking the knife that I was having my wife buy for me for my birthday, I needed to pick something that I was confident I was going to want to keep forever, because as a general rule, I don't sell knives that my wife gets for me, even if I picked them. Like, this was a birthday gift from my wife. So it's about what I was expecting it to be. It's big, it's heavy, it's overbuilt, but it's not too much of any of those things to the point where I won't carry it or use it. Is this going to be like my most carried EDC knife? No. But every now and then it's really fun to put something this beefy in pocket. And I will say also, I carried it on a hike the day after my birthday, and I hiked Mount Baden-Powell, which is at some elevation. I'm training for Whitney right now. Mount Whitney, that is, not a person named Whitney. And so I'm trying to get some elevation in, and I went with a buddy, and it's 4 miles up, 4 miles down, and you gain about 4,000 feet of elevation over the hike. So it's a pretty significant climb. You're just kind of switchbacks the whole way up. And that's a relatively serious hike, 8 miles round trip, but you're gaining some elevation, and you're at elevation, so there's altitude or whatever you want to call it. I sound like a real hiker right now, don't I? Anyway, I had this knife in pocket the whole time. It was the folding knife I carried for that. I had my pack on with my BGM as well, but it wasn't uncomfortable in pocket. The weight wasn't bothering me. If I was doing like my real summit of Mount Whitney, this isn't going to be the knife I put in my pocket. I'm going to pick something ultra light, but it speaks volumes of like I was climbing up and over stuff. There were a couple spots where they were down logs and we had to get under stuff, and having a knife this size in my pocket and still having to articulate my legs and be covering that amount of distance moving. If a knife was uncomfortable, I would feel it. So it's comfortable in pocket. It wasn't like I was like, wow, I forgot I was even carrying a knife that day. Like I could feel that it was there, but it's not always the worst thing to be able to feel that you have a knife in your pocket, as long as it's comfortable there. So I guess that's going to be my first impressions on the ZT308. It's big, it's beastly, it's beefy, it's thick, it's chunky, it's all those things that everyone has said about it. But it's a little bit slicier than I was imagining it being. It actually, like, in terms of the grind that's on it, for EDC knife tasks, it's really good. I put it through some cardboard, it did great. I put it through some rope, it did great. I'll be doing more extensive testing with it. I'll do some testing out here with it, some kind of field testing type stuff. But it's ground really well. It's got a great edge on it. It's comfortable. ZT has been an offender in the past of really bad, too aggressive jimping. The only jimping that's here is on the flipper tab, which I showed you, and a little bit here on the spine. And it's really well done jimping. It's not aggressive. It's not overly sharp. It's nice, tightly spaced, pretty well rounded, and it gives me a good traction point right where my thumb lands. This isn't a knife where my thumb is reaching all the way up to here, because this knife is big for my hands. So right here, it's great. It's really well done jimping. I like that it's there. So yeah, I mean, it's really well done. And I feel like I'd heard a lot of positive things about it, and most of the negatives that I'd heard about this knife were all related to its size and weight. So I really tried to like overestimate how big and heavy it was, and it just kind of like met my expectations of being very big and very heavy, and that kind of makes it cool and fun and different, and this is a ZT that I'm happy to own so far. So I'll let you know how the testing goes with it, if there's anything more that I learn about it as I continue to use and carry it, but it's a really fun knife. It's one that's welcome to be in my collection as ZTs go, and I'm glad that ZT is doing more of this. I'm not a big fan of ZT going the small, lightweight, and even like slip joints and stuff now like that. To me, that's not ZT. It's almost like Kershaw needs to make another division and have a small EDC fancy fixed knife, or fancy folding knife, EDC, whatever you want to call it, branch, because that doesn't feel like ZT to me. ZT feels like this, and so it's nice that ZT makes this now, because it feels like a ZT should, in my opinion. Anyway, that's going to be that for now. This is the ZT308, and it's a big sucker. It's a really fun knife, though. It's fun because it's big. Let's call it that.